by saying he was one of their soldiers. Aren't we playing into their hands?
Well, the reason why people assumed that he was doing this, at least was inspired by Islamic State, is because it's something that Islamic State has called upon people around the world to do, using exactly this sort of methodology. Islamic State has said for some years that since various cells in the West have found it very hard to get hold of the technology to make bombs in recent years, they've been disrupted from doing so. Since it's very hard in the UK, for instance, to get hold of Kalashnikov rifles, ISIS has called on people in countries like this who follow their message to carry out attacks using vehicles, very low-grade attacks, knives, you know, this sort of thing. So that's why it fits a pattern of ISIS-inspired attacks. So we'll find out exactly, or some more of what motivated him in the days and weeks and months to come. As for the question of publicity, this is a huge question which we're always wondering about. This was a good week, after all, wasn't it, to wonder about terrorism and our attitude towards it in general.
And we're doing it again.
We're doing what again?
We're avoiding the common denominator in these attacks. Of course, terrorism comes from all different areas, but we can talk about Islamic terrorism in its own right, and there's nothing wrong with that, and we should be able to.
And again,
all week, I'm not talking about. I said they're separate
things.
Common
denominator.
I'm not. I'm talking about these apparent random attacks, like the one we saw in London last week, that we're putting down to a random criminal. How many random criminals of the same faith are we going to have before we look at the elephant in the room? And it's been in the media all week. We will never know what can possibly have driven him. And the only thing not a possibility is religious belief. And the fact that a person has been involved in crime or has taken drugs does not exclude them for having... no, they're not. I mean, even the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister in the Commons this week told us very matter-of-factly that this was a perversion of a great faith. She didn't offer any scriptural backing for that. In fact, she said it without any analysis or investigation of Scripture at all.
But she also said it without any evidence as to the motivation, of the individual as well.
Peter Hitchens.
There's attacks across Europe.
The IRA and as well, and your coverage of that, and our coverage of IRA atrocities in the past. But Anne-Marie,
what's the alternative to the oxygen of publicity? I mean, are we expected to ignore these things altogether? What is it we're actually looking for here? I don't think we're giving it the correct coverage at all. I mean, Douglas described it as a single terror act. In London, yes, but how many terror attacks have there been across Europe in the last couple of years? And what have they got in common? And with this, can we not use our common sense and sit down and look at the religion that is possibly driving this? Why are, and let me ask, when the IRA were doing what they did everyone scramble to find an excuse? They were criminals, they were involved in drug abuse, they were mentally ill, or did they accept that they were Irish Republicans with an Irish Republican aim?
Well, some were involved in drug dealing.
Why can't we do the same? Yeah. And if there's no problem with Islamic scripture inspiring this, then let's look at it. Why aren't we looking at it? Why is it? If it's not Islamic scripture, then we have no problem.
Wait a minute, Zaba's going to come back on that. But surely the point is, you establish the facts, you get the facts right, you infer from the facts what may have happened, then you report what did happen.
That's what I'm asking for, but I don't think that's.
But you're saying we should start with conclusions.
No, I'm not. I'm saying we want the truth. We want the truth.
We
want to, and I want religious fervour to be included in the list of reasons that made this man.
I don't think anyone is supporting that.
Wait, Peter, in a second.
Why are we bringing scripture into this? If they're not quoting scripture,
because a lot of them quote the verses that say, "Find the infidels, root them out, and kill them."
I debate these.
Douglas wanted to come in. Douglas,
come on. This is a great example of it right here. Mr. Andalusi thinks that none of the terrorists ever quote the Quran. Flat out wrong. Flat out wrong. Let me give you one example. You mentioned it earlier, the killers of Lee Rigby. Michael Adelajo, on his body, when the police arrested him, he had a note in his pocket to his young daughter explaining why he did what he did. It's all on the public record. You can see the facsimile on the BBC's website, and he has footnotes throughout it of Quranic verses that he explains justify, in his view, his actions. Now, that's the beginning. Hang on, let me just finish my point before the proselytization begins, okay? Let me just finish my point. That would seem to me to be, therefore, a very clear occasion, never mind the thousands of others we could list worldwide, a very clear occasion on this country when one of our soldiers was murdered on our streets, where clearly Scripture had something to do with it. So the problem that a lot of us have is we are willing to discuss the drugs bit, we're willing to discuss the foreign policy bit, we're willing to discuss all this. Why are you not willing to concede that there is a religious element? Sometimes.
No, wait. We understand the main point.
Mohammed first. Now, listen, here's my... Very quickly, we have to come to the end.
Obviously, 24-hour news pushes a lot of this. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation because we have the 24-hour news culture. However, there are things about that are unhealthy. But it's nothing like as unhealthy as the fact that if you look back, as I said at the start, about our attitude to terror of the past and our attitude to terror present, when the IRA killed MPs and many policemen and many soldiers, what did we end up doing? We ended up putting the people who had orchestrated that campaign at the heart of government. And that is far sicker. The idea that 20 years from now, anyone who was associated with Khalid Massoud would be put into power, that's far more of a societal sickness than 24-hour news media.
Saba, I'm going to give you the last word, Saba. We've got another...
Some tabloids and some news that has gone out, as we all are aware, that has been misinformation, and things such as, Birmingham is the jihadist capital of England. That's not helpful unless it's backed up by evidence.
It is.
And
it's actually not the capital; it's the second capital of terror.
London is the capital.
London is the capital of terror in the UK. Birmingham is second.
Debatable.
No. If you look at the stats, released earlier this month, it proves that.
Do you know what? I'm going to have...
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.